Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, more severe weather will be impacting areas in the Ohio Valley and the Midwest over the next couple of days after a ferocious area of storms went right through Illinois, Indiana, producing damaging winds as high as 100 miles per hour. Now, luckily over the next few days, things will be a little bit less bad across areas in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, but significant severe weather is still not out of the question. So with all that being said, we're going to break down everything that you need to know in this forecast. But let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. And we currently still have an MCS, which is a mesoscale convective system, going through areas in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. This is an area that has brought scattered, numerous, and even in some instances, widespread damage across areas in Illinois with lots of trees down, power lines down, and it brought damaging winds between 60 to 100 miles per hour, and even a couple tornadoes to areas in Illinois this morning as well as into the afternoon hours. It is going to weaken over the next few hours, and this will eventually become basically the past, but we are going to see more severe weather over the next few days because of the pattern that we're in with an omega block pattern. We have a high pressure system back down in the southern plains. This is actually back down near the Gulf Coast. This is keeping a heat dome back down in areas like Texas with record-breaking temperatures down that direction. And one crazy thing about areas like Texas is that Texas in particular was one of the warmest places on earth yesterday, with record-breaking temperatures between 105 to 115 degrees across much of the state. So that heat dome is going to continue to sit there. We have another chance for severe weather tonight across areas in the high plains. That'll continue. But really what we need to focus on over the next few days is what's coming up, because there's going to be a pretty interesting area of weather across areas in the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, and as well as even back through areas in the high plains. So let's talk a bit more about what that looks like with the jet stream. And you'll notice back over in the western United States, we actually have a trough. This is what's been bringing severe weather to areas over in the high plains over the last several days. We have another trough that's back actually located in Minnesota, or just north of Minnesota, north of Wisconsin, and this is also helping to aid the risk for severe weather across portions of the Midwest and as well as the Ohio Valley. And then our big dome of heat back down in the southern plains, primarily located along the Gulf Coast, and that's bringing record-breaking temperatures for the next several days. But you'll notice as we go throughout the week, and even closer to Friday and to Saturday, there will be an increased risk of severe weather for those back over in the Ohio Valley and the Midwest. And the main reason why is because we'll have that trough start to move off to the east, though it's going to start to weaken with very weak upper level winds. We're going to have a little bit of an increased risk of severe weather across areas like the Ohio Valley, and again, maybe the Midwest as well. But the good news behind all of this is that the risk for severe weather over the next couple of days is not too high. It's not as high as what we saw today. It's going to be actually lower overall. And right now, we do have a slight risk of severe weather. Very large area, by the way. It goes all the way from the Ohio Valley all the way back through the high plains. This is a region that we could see the risk for significant damaging winds and large hail. Maybe an isolated tornado, but that risk should stay very low, especially across the Ohio Valley. I think that tornado risk really stays near zero. But as of right now, the damaging wind potential is the main concern. Right now, it really includes areas like North Carolina, northern Georgia, back through again the Ohio Valley, and as well as into the central plains. And large hail is not going to be too concerning. It is a low threat overall, so some hail maybe up to golf ball size, and a few of the storms that develop tomorrow could end up occurring. But overall, the main concern right now is really going to be focused across Kentucky, southern and central Illinois, and as well as southern Indiana, which, by the way, Illinois and Indiana do not need more severe weather, and Kentucky can stay in that same boat. We have seen so many reports of damage across these areas from damaging winds, not just today, but over the last couple of days from the storm activity that's happened there. So very concerning stuff, and it is just going to continue over the next couple of days. Luckily, it's at a little bit of a lower extent, but once you see Saturday's outlook, it is going to get a little bit more concerning once we go into Saturday, even though tomorrow is a little bit more of a lull. So here's the timing currently. We'll see another area of storms tomorrow morning, actually, across areas like Missouri and Iowa. This is taking almost an identical track to what we just saw with that MCS that went through Illinois as well as Indiana, producing damaging winds up to 100 miles per hour. This is like the same thing, but it will not luckily be as intense as what we saw. You'll see it actually will weaken as we go throughout the morning hours. So a sigh of relief overall for those in Illinois, but once we go into the afternoon hours, things get a little bit more concerning. Now, really over the Midwest, things should remain at a lull in terms of severe weather. We shouldn't see a whole lot of severe weather here. If anything, it's just an isolated storm or two producing severe weather. But if we go further to the south across the Ohio Valley, this is where I have more concern. So overnight tonight, there will be more storm activity across Kentucky and southern Indiana. But look at tomorrow morning, another maybe small scale MCS going from north to south towards Georgia, which again, an MCS is a mesoscale convective system, fancy word for a line of storms. And then look back over here to the west. Again, that's your weakening area of storms that I just mentioned back over the Midwest. But once we go into the afternoon hours, that is when we could see some very significant supercells develop across areas near Missouri, as well as Illinois and western Kentucky. This is really concerning for large hail and damaging winds. I still don't think we have much of a tornado risk tomorrow. It should stay very low, but have a tornado action plan in place just in case there's any sort of tornado warnings. But I think that threat remains low tomorrow. And then once we go into the evening hours, storms will continue to really remain fairly slow moving too. So these will not be quick movers in comparison to what we saw today, where storms are moving as fast as 80 miles per hour. So that's what we're basically comparing it here to. They're not going to be very fast, probably a storm motion of maybe 30 miles per hour at the most. And then storms will start to weaken during the overnight hours, and that's when things will start to dry out. And then as we head into Saturday, that is when things become much more concerning. We only have a slight risk of severe weather right now, but I would not be surprised if this went to an enhanced risk. Damaging winds is definitely the main concern as we go into Saturday. With the addition of large hail, there could be a couple of isolated tornadoes, but I still think the damaging wind potential is the main concern at this current time. Now let's talk about the timing. Beginning with Saturday morning, it should stay relatively non-severe for storms on Saturday morning, but once we go into the later morning, that is when storms start to ramp up, especially across areas like central and as well as central Indiana and Illinois. That is where storms will start to ramp up then. And then once we get closer to lunchtime, we could end up seeing maybe a bit more of a cluster or line of storms develop. That could impact areas like Ohio and as well as back through Kentucky. And we'll see a better look at that back through the Ohio Valley. You'll notice again that area of storms developing during the late morning and into the afternoon hours. That is what's the most concerning currently as we go into Saturday. Now, the future radars don't go out that far yet, but we will be watching mainly for that concern of damaging winds, maybe some large hail, and perhaps again, maybe an isolated tornado or two. But the low-level shear should remain a bit weaker on Saturday. That's why the tornado risk should overall stay lower, but we might see a couple of embedded tornadoes in that cluster of storms going into Saturday. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about the long-term weather forecast over the next 7 days across the United States, because I will likely not have really any videos in between now and July 5th since I'm going away. But anyways, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. But we will talk a little bit more about the long-term here. So the jet stream will stay pretty calm over the next several days other than this weekend. So once we go into next week, things become more calm and as well as a bit drier in parts of the United States. But this is only in the upper levels. If we look back down in the lower levels, there will be some activity primarily across areas back over in the eastern half of the United States. So this is what the future radar looks like over the next several days. Again, we'll continue to see rounds of showers and storms in the Ohio Valley and as well as the Midwest. And once we go into early next week, that is when a low pressure system near the surface will move off to the east. But you'll notice as we go into Monday and as well as into Tuesday, close to the 4th of July, look at this, pretty big dry slot across the United States from the Midwest and parts of Canada back through the southern plains. And you'll notice as well, the millibar levels are going to be pretty much around 1,015, maybe 1,020. That's drier air. So that'll keep things a bit drier, at least for the 4th of July. But the other concern is it'll be much warmer. So make sure that you are taking those proper precautions with the heat. It could be as high as 100 degrees in some areas of the United States on the 4th of July. But once we go into Wednesday to Thursday of next week, storms might start to ramp up a bit more, especially across the central and southern plains and perhaps in the southeast. Areas actually near Texas could be a bit more active next week, but severe weather is going to remain at a low-end threat for the most part next week. So things will be a little bit drier, which is good news because I am going away again. I will not have any live coverage in between now and July 5th. And the temperatures will be very hot over the next several days. You'll notice the very warm air across the eastern half of the United States. It's not going to really get any better anytime soon, but there could be a cool down as we go into the later half of next week. But overall, again, things remain a little bit more calm going into next week. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment down below, and subscribe if you're not already.